While overcoming one of the top four seeds in the NFC playoff picture, the Washington Commanders proved that they have the heart to win when it matters most and gave rise to the Cardiac Commanders. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, David Harrison, covering the Washington Commanders for CommanderGameDay.com, part of Sports Illustrated's family of sites. I'm also helping out locally with WUSA9.com this season. I'm here with you every Monday through Friday. Thank you for coming through today. And if you're an everydayer, I want to give you a special thanks for coming through every single day to Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to today's episode, where we're going to talk about the Washington Commanders hanging with the heavy hitters. We're going to talk about Dyami Brown's push towards 2025, and we're going to talk about the rise of the Cardiac Commanders first and foremost. And we're going to do so thanks to FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. From overcoming one of the top NFC teams in the NFC playoff bracket, Washington Commanders proved that they have the heart to win when it matters most. The power of education, resilience, and growth all lead to the birth of the Cardiac Commanders, a nickname that I was not aware of immediately after the wild card win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but I thoroughly enjoy hearing people call the Washington Commanders that. I don't know how widespread it is, but, it's out there a little bit. And as we talk about today's episode, we're going to go over 3 lessons learned from the wild card matchup. We usually do 5 lessons learned, but we're going to do 3 because we got a lot of mailbag questions that I want to get to. So we're also going to do mailbag here. So we're going to trim it down to 3 lessons learned. We're going to hit the mailbag. We're going to have a good, fun episode here. And we're going to talk about lesson number 1. Knowledge is power. Education is power. The more you know, all that stuff, all those cliches. At the end of the day, the Washington Commanders are proving right now that their coaching staff has the ability, once they have some experience against you, once they have a good amount of tape against you, that they can draw up a winning formula. They have beaten, the Washington Commanders beat the 3 teams this season that they lost to the first time they had to play. The Philadelphia Eagles, NFC East Division champs, second best record in the NFC. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, NFC South Division champions, and the Cowboys. They lost all 3 first games against those teams, won all of the second opportunities to face each of those teams, and their margin of defeat to margin of victory adjustment has been pretty impressive as well. Against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in week 1 of the regular season, Washington Commanders fell by 17 points ultimately. Now, that 17-point defeat doesn't really describe the entire game flow of the night. The game was much more competitive than that 17-point final score, margin of victory is going to tell you. But then we go to the wild card round, and the Washington Commanders are the team coming out +3, meaning they had a +20-point output against Tampa Bay Buccaneers between the first and the second meeting. Go to the Philadelphia Eagles, losing by 8 the first time around. And again, game flow doesn't really support the margin of victory. And then they get a +3-point win over the Philadelphia Eagles in the second go-round, a +11-point improvement. And then -8 points again to the Dallas Cowboys the first time they faced off. That wild fourth quarter, those final moments of that game, just incredibly insane. And just, your heart kind of goes out to everybody who's got an immediate post-game article that's due, because people were just writing and rewriting, and it was just craziness. They end up winning by 4 the next time, so a +12 point differential in favor of the Washington Commanders. And in total, they averaged a +14 improvement in games against opponents that they faced one time before. Now, of course, they've not faced the Detroit Lions here. So again, how much is that going to apply to the week coming? We'll have to see what they can do, but they do have 2+ years of tape of Ben Johnson calling the Detroit Lions offense. So that's certainly going to help at least a little bit to give them some knowledge, even though they don't have any experience as a group together, this team so far against the Detroit Lions. Lesson number 2, Cardiac Commanders have all the heart. That's the way I titled. They've won 5 straight games on the final play of the game. However, they have been competitive enough to be in similar situations throughout the year. Of course, they've won 6 games on the final play, the 5 in a row here, including the wild card round and also the Hail Mary victory over the Chicago Bears that just essentially wrecked the Chicago Bears. The Bears just were never the same after that. Just because You're playing a team for the first time. Going back to that first thing that we learned doesn't necessarily mean it's, time for gloom and doom and all those things. So against some of the top teams in the NFL, they've got 1-score losses against the Eagles and the Cowboys, not a top team in the NFL, but still the Cowboys first go around. You could argue that they could have or should have won both of those games. You should have beaten the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that's two high-quality opponents, the Eagles and the Eagles and Steelers, two playoff teams, obviously, high-quality opponents that you're 1-score deficit or you arguably should have won those games. They had a 7-point loss to the Baltimore Ravens. If you remember at the end of the game, Washington Commanders score. They have enough time that the defense can get the ball back for them. They have the opportunity to potentially put a game-winning drive together. Unfortunately, Baltimore Ravens offense able to kill the clock and end the game. So that killed that rally. But a 7-point loss to the Baltimore Ravens, certainly nothing to get too scoffy about. So the Washington Commanders have proven over the year, during the course of the year, that they can win against some of these top teams. Right, again, they beat the Philadelphia Eagles, arguably should have beaten the Pittsburgh Steelers. And even the games that they lost, they can at least be competitive against teams like the Baltimore Ravens. So I think that kind of lends you a little bit more confidence moving forward in the postseason. We'll get to that conversation here a little bit later. Lesson number 3, wide receiver Dyami Brown has grown tremendously. I'm going to give you a quote here from Cliff Kingsbury, offensive coordinator, speaking to us on Wednesday. He said, quote, Dyami is a guy who, when we got here, I had known about him from North Carolina. We obviously looked at him when I was at Arizona, and the attitude and the approach really has gotten more businesslike and more professional throughout this season, and it's paying off. I mean, he's showing up over and over and over, always been able to run, always been able to be really good with the ball in his hands, but his route technique and fundamentals, things like that are really improving, and it's a credit to him and the way he's approached this season, end quote. And I love hearing Cliff Kingsbury talk about Dyami Brown this way. I love seeing Dyami Brown doing these things on the field, because if you go back to preseason, training camp, all that stuff, when it came time to get to like the roster cut down period, I really didn't know if Dyami Brown was going to make this roster. It really kind of looked like Dyami might be one of these guys on the way out. Now, of course, that was before they traded Jahan Dotson. Once they traded Jahan Dotson, it's like, okay, now Dyami Brown's probably going to stay, but you still kind of had these issues where a lot of Dyami Brown's biggest plays in his career had come because the defense made a mistake. Someone failed to rotate, or a DB fell, or a DB just, played really bad technique. It wasn't as much about Dyami Brown manipulating defenders, taking advantage of defenders, things like that, so much as it was just mistakes on the opposite end benefiting him. However, this season, that's kind of changed a little bit. And for a position that's as dependent as the wide receiver position is, it's still possible for a wide receiver to create things. And we see that when you look at a guy like Terry McLaurin. He can set a guy up with a move on the outside or a move on the inside, shimmy shake a little bit, maybe get a little bit of a shoulder dip in there, do whatever he needs to do, stack the defensive back, do all kinds of things, attack their toes. There's all kinds of things that a receiver can do that helps them become a better option for their quarterback. Still got to have the quarterback deliver the ball, but if you do those things that help the quarterback have confidence that you're going to be available when he delivers, then you'll get the ball sent your way a lot more often. Dyami Brown is starting to do some of those things, and it's led to a career-high 30 receptions, 308 yards, 75% catch percentage in the regular season this year. And, of course, wild card round, 5 catches, 89 yards, and a touchdown, his first postseason touchdown of his career. In fact, his first postseason stats of his career. So a great postseason debut for Dyami Brown. With Dyami Brown's career season putting him in contract talks, we've also got the Commanders facing the Lions offense that thrives on testing defensive discipline. And we're about to dive into whether Dyami's growth will earn him a long-term deal and how Joe Witt can stop Ben Johnson from putting his defense into a bind. All that coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you in part by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement for the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. This weekend, Washington Commanders are 9.5-point underdogs against the Detroit Lions, and the Eagles are favored to beat the Los Angeles Rams by 6.5 points, setting up a potential NFC East rubber match if Washington is the lone road winner again this weekend, like it was last weekend. Then Washington Commanders will be traveling to face those Philadelphia Eagles in the link. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. How much has Dyami's career year impacted his future in Washington? We're going to talk about that coming up next. And if you want to get even more out of the Locked On Commanders podcast, you can sign up to be an insider today at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. We've got numerous new insiders this week. Appreciate all of you. Welcome you to the group. You're all going to get text messages from me. They're giving you my opinions, analysis, information, news, sometimes some just random chat conversations that we're going to have. But not only that, you're also going to be able to text me your thoughts, your questions, your analysis, and you're going to get access to insider exclusives like our Zoom conferences that are happening before games, after games. And don't worry, guys, we're still going to do Zoom conferences during the offseason, especially as we make our rounds around the Senior Bowl potentially. Look, if the Washington Commanders are still playing while the Senior Bowl is happening, I'm not going to the Senior Bowl. I'm going to cover the Washington Commanders. I think you guys would be okay with that. But we're also going to be at the Super Bowl, hopefully with the Washington Commanders. Scouting combines coming up, all kinds of fun stuff coming up. So make sure you go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Even though the season is ending, there's still plenty of reason for you to sign up. Get the first 2 weeks for free. See if you like it. And one of the perks is you get to be the influencers here in our mailbag episodes. And we've got our first mailbag question coming from Dr. Wonderful. Has Dyami Brown played himself into another contract with us or with another team? I'm just going to tell you bluntly, yes, especially when you hear Cliff talk about the growth that Dyami Brown has shown this season. I think very clearly his coaching staff is very happy with him. His quarterback is very happy with him. He's a great dude in the locker room to have. Always really liked Dyami Brown, and I'm very, very happy to see the steps that he's taking in the NFL. However, when I said yes, I did not tell you, yes, he will be with the Washington Commanders next year. I told you, yes, he will get a contract. Dyami Brown does not have to worry about being unemployed. Likely, if it's Washington, it's going to be a one-year deal. It might be a one-year deal anywhere because this one season looks like kind of the anomaly. NFL teams typically like to make you prove it. So you may get a one-year deal, whether it's in Washington or whether it's somewhere else. If it is a multi-year deal, probably looking at a front-loaded deal, all the guarantees in year one. That way, if that team has buyer's remorse, they can always get out of it down the road. Of course, it's a two-way road. Dyami Brown also has to want to come back. And I'm not saying that Dyami Brown wouldn't want to come back to play with Jaden, to play with his teammates, to be part of this organization, because I think from talking to him, I get the vibe he's certainly enjoying himself. But if the Commanders bring in another veteran, not T. Higgins, that's not going to happen, but we'll talk about that later in the offseason. Maybe a guy like Chris Godwin. And if Dyami, his agent, or if the team just simply tells him, hey, look, we're probably going to tap one in the draft as well, then you could be looking, if you're Dyami Brown, at being the fourth, fifth receiver. I mean, and that's if they don't bring back OZ and Jamison Crowder. If they bring back OZ and or Jamison Crowder, I mean, you might end up being the odd man looking out, because I don't think they're going to give up on Luke McCaffrey 1 year after drafting him. He's going to come back on this roster next year. So it's a crowded room. Could get even more crowded, and Dyami may end up saying, look, I need to take my chances elsewhere to get some reps, get some opportunities to prove myself. It would be unfortunate. I certainly would be sad to see Dyami go. But I think at the end of the day, what he has shown this season, the production that he's been able to have, is going to get him at least an opportunity, if not with this football team, with another football team. But I have a lot of my gut says he'll be back here next year, not somewhere else. But we'll see how that whole thing unfolds. Like I said, I could tell you the same thing about Olamide Zaccheaus. I could tell you the same thing about Jamison Crowder. So we'll see how that whole thing goes. And of course, we will do our position by position offseason breakdowns, and I will force myself into a corner to pick which ones I bring back. I'm already not looking forward to having that discussion, because I'm going to be wrong. No matter who I don't pick to come back, I'm going to be wrong. Someone's going to say, I can't believe you let that guy walk out the door. And I'm going to say, I know. Michael Scott smacked the table. Thank you. I know. Anyway, moving on to the mailbag. Daniel said Marshon Lattimore did struggle heavily against Mike Evans, Bucs wide receiver Mike Evans, but he competed and made key tackles in that game. Tampa's last possession ended in a field goal was an example of that. I saw Mike Sanderson miss some tackles, but he made a TD saving play, helping out Benjamin St. Juste. Now it's a much tougher challenge against the Detroit Lions playmakers. How should Joe Witt play these pass catchers, especially with Ben Johnson knowing how to put defenders in conflict? Should Marshon play on one side, follow St. Brown, or pray to the football gods? Well, he doesn't need to pray, because for starters, I don't know that God really cares which team wins. But on the other side of that, Marshon Lattimore has plenty of talent. But there was several examples of rust. You're absolutely correct. Joe Witt Jr. was asked a similar question, was very upfront about it. Said, look, the dude got one full speed practice before this playoff game. And considering that fact, and the fact that he missed the previous 2 games, coming out there competing against a Hall of Famer like Mike Evans, he did pretty much about as well as you could expect him to do. certainly has the talent to do better, has the work ethic to be better. This whole week, Joey Jr. says he's getting full speed practices all week long, and this is going to help him break some of that rust. So he's looking forward to a better version of Marshon Lattimore this weekend. But I also think that Quan Martin is going to be crucial in this game. I know you're talking about cornerbacks, but I'm talking about the safety here. I don't think Marshon is necessarily going to follow Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, certainly there could be this theory or this scheme, this approach by Joey Jr. where Marshon, you're going to have the X receiver on every play, and that X may be Amon-Ra St. Brown most of the time, and he may flip-flop sides of the field, but sometimes it may be Jamison Williams, or maybe somebody else. But I don't think Amon-Ra is necessarily just going to attach himself to Amon-Ra St. Brown. Or Marshon Lattimore, is going to attach himself to Amon-Ra St. Brown. But I do think you're going to see that matchup quite a bit. As for Mikey, yeah, man, I'll admit, Mikey's size showed up a little bit more in that game than I think it has the rest of the season. And I didn't like it. You know what I mean? But overall, I'm still confident in Mikey. I'm still going to tell you that he plays bigger than he actually is. The question I really have is what happens when the Lions put dueling go routes against a single high coverage safety, Quan Martin. And he's got to choose one of the other guys to help out, and those guys are on an island by themselves against their wide receiver. That's really where I'm kind of looking. This team is going to go deep. This Detroit Lions offense is going to go deep, so we'll see how they approach it. But I don't think Marshon necessarily needs to attach himself to somebody, and I don't think he needs to pray. But I do think that Quan Martin having that deep safety coverage is going to be huge. And, of course, discipline is going to be key across the board. Joey Jr. on Wednesday, usually we talk to them on Thursday, sorry for the hesitation, on Wednesday saying, quote, the Detroit Lions, test your discipline. I think Ben does a really nice job of understanding coverages. He understands horizontal spacing as well as vertical spacing. He understands the responsibility of every player, and he's going to test the discipline of those players and of the coverage. And so you have to be where you're supposed to be and let your eyes be true. And if you don't, he's going to take advantage of it. So that's what makes them. And then they really have good players. They have 9, 26, real speed. And they're going to have to try to get the matchups. They're going to try to do those things. And then you have 14. He's just a great receiver, inside, outside, can do it all. So they're good as a football team, end quote. The good news is the Washington Commanders have years of tape to comb through about Ben Johnson and his offense and these weapons. And as we discussed with the getting a second crack at some of these teams and some of these players, look, Baltimore Ravens, different team with Derrick Henry on it. Philadelphia Eagles, different team with Saquon Barkley and with Kellen Moore at the controls. Dallas Cowboys, a little bit of a different team. That's still a bad loss. Let's not sugarcoat that thing. Pittsburgh Steelers, a little bit of a different team. Even then, I would still say, should have won. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, guys. I mean, Liam Cohen, the offensive coordinator in Tampa, like for that week 1 matchup, those guys are studying tape of Kentucky, of college, of where Liam Cohen was a offensive coordinator the year before. They're not even looking at Baker Mayfield, Tampa Bay Buccaneers tape because there is no Liam Cohen, like Baker Mayfield, Tampa Bay tape for week 1. So completely different team. This Detroit Lions team, they've got plenty of footage on. So I think they're going to have a pretty good approach to how to try to beat these guys. Now, the Commanders are proving in my eyes they can hang in a fight with anyone, but they're going to have to prove that again against the Detroit Lions. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is also brought to you in part by LinkedIn Talent Solutions. Growing your small business in 2025 comes down to how well you can hire. And let's face it, better hires start with smarter insights. Well, that's where LinkedIn comes in. With the strongest hiring data available, LinkedIn helps you identify the right candidates, giving you the confidence to make the best decisions for your business. I've used LinkedIn Jobs myself, and I can tell you it's a game changer when it comes to hiring the right fit. Small businesses are wearing a lot of hats, so every hire is crucial. LinkedIn gets that. That's why they connect you with the best candidates using data you won't find anywhere else. From unique skills and interests to connections you share, LinkedIn helps you find the right person for the job. In fact, 72% of small businesses say that LinkedIn has helped them find high-quality candidates. I know from experience how important it is to make the right hiring decisions. So having access to insights like that is incredibly important. So hire smarter this year and find your next great hire on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. The Washington Commanders have already proven in my eyes that they can hang in a fight with just about anybody, but they're going to have to prove it again against the Detroit Lions. And that comes up our next question in the mailbag. How far can the Washington Commanders realistically go in the playoffs? On one of the Locked On NFL shows, that's me, David Harrison, I said NFC Championship. I don't see it. That's the person writing the question. Make me a believer, tongue in cheek a little bit. But look, the Lions are the biggest hurdle in this whole thing as far as the Washington Commanders getting to the NFC Championship game. And I mean, that's kind of no duh because the Lions are the matchup. If you don't beat the Detroit Lions, you're not going to the NFC Championship game. You beat them, you're going to the NFC Championship game. But overall, the Detroit Lions are the best team in the NFC playoffs, even with the injuries that they've suffered, even with the Philadelphia Eagles having some of their guys coming back, Jalen Hurts clearing concussion protocol and all that stuff. In my opinion, the Detroit Lions are the best team. Therefore, if the Washington Commanders beat the Detroit Lions, I'm going to tell you right now, whether the Washington Commanders go to Philadelphia or whether the Washington Commanders go to Los Angeles, face the Rams, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to predict the Washington Commanders to beat whoever it is in the NFC Championship game. But the Detroit Lions are a little bit of a different story. However, like I said, the best thing I can give you to try to boost your confidence is that the Washington Commanders have proven that they can hang with anybody. How? Well, because the biggest loss they had all year, and the only one that they had was by more than one score, came in the very first week of the season against Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a top 5 scoring offense overall in the National Football League. They had Chris Godwin healthy at the time. They had Rachaad White going. They had Bucky Irving going. And they had the element of surprise. Again, every single look that the Washington Commanders defense got against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense in week 1 was an unscouted look. There was no tape to study. Yes, you have preseason tape. That's not real tape. We talked about that during the preseason. So that first week against the Buccaneers, the only game this team was beaten by multiple scores. I think that kind of tells you what this team is really made of. For all the mistakes, holes in the rosters, ups and downs, this team hasn't lost by more than 8 points in a single game this season. Not against the Ravens, not against the Eagles, not the Steelers, or any other team that was fighting for a playoff spot or in the playoffs. So if you're in the fight, you can win. I don't know that's enough to convince you, but that's the best I got, because I'm not going to promise you that the Commanders are going to beat the Detroit Lions. That would be reckless. But I can promise you that they can beat the Detroit Lions. We just got to see if they will. Don't forget, the Lions also have to defend Terry McLaurin, Olamide Zaccheaus, Jameson Crowder, Dyami Brown, Luke McCaffrey, Zach Ertz, Brian Robinson Jr., who is due for a big game, Austin Eckler, who's been around the block a couple times, and Jaden Daniels, who might be the most dynamic quarterback to enter the NFL in years. So it's not just the Detroit Lions bringing in weapons that this Washington Commanders defense has to worry about. That Detroit Lions defense has some things to worry about as well. So that's the best I can do. Hopefully that got you charged up. And if not, hopefully a win against the Detroit Lions will get you charged up. Fran came through. My only question, will Chris Rodriguez finally play? Yes, but maybe not. I don't know, guys. Wish I could tell you better. It's the best I got for you, Fran. I'm sorry, brother. I know that that's not gonna do it for you, but you guys know this already, especially everydayers, man. I want Chris Rodriguez getting more burn. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. Look, the Detroit Lions, we're going to dive into this a little bit deeper as we get into the week. The Detroit Lions, overall, their rushing stats look amazing. Yards per carry, however, they're actually not all that good as a run defense. So we're going to dive into how the Washington Commanders might be able to exploit that and why I think Chris Rodriguez should be active this weekend later on in the week on Locked On Commanders. But first, we got to get Matt Derry in here. Locked On Lions, Locked On Commanders, NFC Divisional Round crossover Thursday episode. That is the next episode we will post. In the meantime, if you've got questions or comments, just text me directly. I'll become a Locked On Commanders insider. Join subtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. If you submitted a question that is not in this episode, don't worry. I've got a continuation document of mailbag questions. We are going to get to them in due time. For your next listen, make sure you check out the Locked On NFL podcast. Tyler Rowland in the morning, Tony Wiggins in the afternoon. It's the all-new Locked On NFL, and it's twice per day. As always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day. Everydayers, thanks for coming through every stinking day. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I will see you right back here next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.